One question I get asked all the time by podcasters, it's literally been 5 years. Every time I see a podcaster, they ask me, well, how many downloads do I need to get sponsored? The truth is there is no specific number. It depends on the market that you're in, how many episodes you put out, if you've been podcasting for a certain amount of time, because some shows will invest in you based on what your previous show did. Today, we got to talk about what your show is worth and how you can calculate that. Welcome to the Podcast Profit Club. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the show. Appreciate you being here. Now today we got to get a little in depth on the sponsorship side of things, man, because I usually say audience doesn't matter, and it doesn't unless you're focusing on getting sponsored. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that listenership doesn't matter at all. It obviously does because you need listeners, but you can't get sponsored before you even put one episode out. The reality is you got to know how to have those conversations and how to position your show. Most importantly, how to work with the sponsor after you get that deal so that your show actually gets them results. That's what's most important. They want to know that when they spend money to work with you, that they're going to get some return on that investment. If they do, they'll work with you again. So I want to break things down for you and explain how you can actually get sponsored even if your listeners are under 100 downloads an episode. First thing you got to think about is what leverage do you have? Are you a part of some kind of community? Are you a part of some club or something? What privilege do you have, honestly, that's going to help you get this deal done? That's important. For me, I can go to a company and say, hey, I've been podcasting this many years. I work with this brand and this brand, all of those things. So you should sponsor the show before it even goes live. It's going to be successful because everything else I did before this was successful. That is leverage. That is personal brand leverage that I have earned over the years. Now, if you don't have that, how does it work for you? You still have leverage. I can tell you one area of leverage that most podcasters overlook is social platforms. If you have, let's just say, 20,000 followers on Instagram and you want to launch a podcast, you should launch that show with at least one sponsor. Honestly, it should be two, but at least one. And this is why. When you go to a company, you let them know, hey, look, I'm launching this podcast, but I do already have an existing audience. So I'll be converting them from one platform over to the other. Obviously, not 100% of my listeners are going to come from Instagram. I'm not going to convert 100% of my audience to another platform, obviously, but I can guarantee at least 25%. Now, if you can get 25% of 20,000 people, that is 5,000 people. Now, just think about how valuable it is in the podcast space. 5,000 listeners tuning into you for 30 to 45 minutes, even an hour, is very valuable. That's what you tell the company. Hey, I have this many followers on Twitter. My newsletter is this size. Combined, I have an audience of 100,000 people. I'm going to convert 5% of that audience. That's 5,000 people. After about 3 months, I'm going to have an audience of 5,000 to 6,000 listeners. When you position yourself that way, you're using all your other platforms as leverage to get the deal done. Now, some people would say this is unethical, but it's really not, because again, unless you don't have that big audience somewhere, then you're good. You're good to go. Now, if you're lying about your reach, then that's a problem. But if you're just saying, hey, I'm taking my listeners from all these other places I am consistently over here, then there's nothing wrong with that. If you have 50,000 subscribers on YouTube and you want them to go and listen to the audio version, it's a highly likely you're going to get most of those people to convert. And that's why you use generous numbers too. I never say 50% conversion rate. That's just ridiculous. Like, come on, that's a lot. Like, I never say that. The most I say is 20%. And again, that works very, very well because now the company is going to say, well, you already have an existing audience. That's great. That makes you look like you already have done some work in the online space. You put some effort in. You're not just somebody who's starting a show who doesn't exist online at all. You know, some people work full-time jobs and started a podcast during COVID, and now they're like, hey, I want to get sponsored. It's like, look, you got to put in some work first. You got to build something. Now, the second part of this is where even more leverage comes into play. You can even add in those social platforms to the deal. This is what I mean. Instead of just offering them a pre-roll, mid-roll, post-roll, whatever, you can also offer them social posts. So if you have a massive Instagram following, let them know, hey, look, for this first deal, I'll even throw in some story post and maybe even a feed post that'll stay up for 48 hours or something like that. Something like that is a great extra leverage piece because, again, if you have 20,000 followers and you're inside of their niche and their market, that's absolutely perfect for you. Most podcasters don't look at this as it's theirs. But when you build up any platform like that, it is your platform. You own it. So if anybody else wants to use it, they need to be paying you for it. And I know what most people do is they take the episode, they record, and they go and post it everywhere else. No, you're not doing that. Not unless the sponsor's paying for that kind of attention. Now, if you want to market your show, that's fine. But if the sponsor isn't paying for it, if they don't want it as part of the deal, then you say no. You can't post on social. But adding that into your deal, especially the first time around, if you have, like 3 episodes, that is a great way to get your first sponsor, because now you're taking them to an existing platform where your audience already is. Now, again, this is really important. You can't make up your audience size or your reach. You can't do that, because they can easily go and search the name. They can easily go and look at the page to see how many followers you have, what the engagement is like. Are you getting likes? Are you getting replies on comments or something like that? Because let's be real, we all see people that have bought their Instagram followers. It's very clear they bought followers. It's very clear. You got 20,000 followers and you can't get to 500 likes. Come on, man. Like, Instagram is bad. It ain't that bad. So you don't want to lie about any of that stuff, man. I promise you, it's going to come back on you. Now, another thing I want to put in this too, and this is very, very important when it comes to how much your show is worth. Your show is worth the work that you put in on it. And what I mean by that is you got to reach out to these companies and actually do the work. I talk to a lot of podcasters. I've worked with a lot of hosts over the years, and I can tell you that 95% of the hosts I work with don't do any other work I tell them to do. I broke it down. When I got my first sponsor, it took me reaching out to 500 companies. 500. I emailed 500 companies, and it's absurd because I just was emailing anybody I could find. I mean, big companies. I was emailing big companies like Nike and Adidas. I emailed Nick Cannon's company when I had my music podcast, just because he sold headphones. And I'm like, I'm talking to him too, just trying. Then I also email small businesses, companies that are on Amazon and boutiques on Instagram. You got to play both sides of it, because when you play both sides, you're going to get a result. Reaching out to 500 companies, maybe I think 20 something responded. I got about 10 on the phone and I closed the deal with 1. That was a number for me. Now it'll be a lot easier because it's more mainstream and all that. I still believe you got to put in that work. You got to do the outreach. Your show is only worth what you put into it. And another thing, you have to put your time and effort into building a platform somewhere. Do whatever you got to do to build a platform, whether it's a Facebook group, a big Instagram account. It could be any of these things, a newsletter, Twitter account, whatever it is. Build a platform for your show. It doesn't have to be named after the show, but it has to be a platform where it's very clear that you are engaging with the audience, because that becomes an asset for your show. And I'm going to do another video on podcast brand assets and what the best ones are, but keep in your mind, in the back of your mind, that you have to start building a platform. Not only is it great to grow your show and get listeners, it's even great to leverage in relationships with sponsors. Take a step back and think about where you are as far as your show is worth, right? Stop looking at the downloads. Stop panicking, saying, oh, I'm not getting X amount of listeners. Start building a platform. That is the most valuable thing you can do.